Hello friends, good day to all of you. In the last video, we started financial system, and once again I am recalling to all of you, we divided financial system into two segments, money market and capital market. And still money market is going on. I have already told you that money market and the entire financial system is very important for our examination. That's why we are doing it in too much detail. And in this video, we are just going to continue once again where we ended our last video, that is on the functions of RBI. As far as the entire functions of RBI is concerned, the last function was the credit control by RBI, which is also referred to as monetary policy of RBI. And if you could recall, I mentioned that credit control by RBI is one of the most important functions of RBI, coupled with the most important macroeconomic event taking place in the Indian economy. The entire economy is affected by the credit control policy of RBI or the monetary policy of RBI. These policies are announced by RBI from time to time. In the recent past years, it was decided by RBI to review this policy on bi-monthly basis, and which is still in practice. Bi-monthly means after every 2 months all these interest rates and policies are reviewed and properly announced by RBI governor. And this is the whole mechanism in front of you. Yesterday we talked in detail, but once again just I'm going to reflect the same thing in a flowchart manner. This will help you a lot, I think. The entire mechanism and the tools in the hands of RBI to control credit in the system has been divided in two segments: quantitative credit control and qualitative credit control. Qualitative credit control is also known as selective credit control. Selective means not for all, depending on segregation to select wherever something is happening. And the instruments that has been given under qualitative credit control must be remembered to you. The first thing is that these instruments are not fixed. These are not fixed. It is up to the RBI. And the first one is moral suasion. In the last video we talked in detail. Upper and lower limit of rate of interest, margin fixing, sometimes some specific schemes, etc. Similarly, on the other hand, quantitative credit control, there are two types of instruments in the hands of RBI under quantitative credit control: direct measures and indirect measures. Direct measures means this will be applicable for each and every commercial banks. They cannot deviate, they cannot disobey. And the CRR and SLR, that is cash reserve ratio, sometimes it is also called cash reserve requirements. Both are same, no difference. And second one is SLR, that is a statutory liquidity ratio or requirements. These are falling under direct measures. In the last video we have talked in detail. I hope that you would have understood. Indirect measures, LAF, liquidity adjustment facility. Liquidity under liquidity adjustment facility means in what way liquidity is adjusted in the system. And here something is wrong in this chart. This repo rate and reverse repo rate must fall under LAF. So sorry for that. You will just consider LAF, repo rate and reverse repo rate under LAF. LAF, liquidity under adjustment facility. Repo rates and reverse repo rate has been explained clearly in detail in the last video. We talked OMO, open market operations. It is a mechanism of sale and purchase of government securities, and the bank rate. Bank rate, there might be some question based on the difference between repo rate and bank rate. The only and basic difference is that though both are falling under indirect measures, under bank rate, RBI lends to the commercial banks for a long term period, while under repo rate, RBI lends to other banks for a short term period, and the rates are different, and the repo rate of interest is rather lower. As of now it is 4%, and the bank rate as of now is 4.25%, so it is little bit higher than the repo rate. So these are the differences. Okay, now yesterday I told you that we are going to explain in detail uh, the development of banking system in India, development of banking system in India. Yesterday I told you, so this video will be basically focused on the development of banking system in India. You must know that it's very important for all of you as a story. Whatever the banking system today we are enjoying in our country, that is completely based upon European banking system. It is based upon European banking system. Okay, so when European company around 16th and 17th century they came to India for trade, there was no bank in our country. In our country in those days, domestic bankers or indigenous bankers were functioning. So that Indian typical Indian kind of banking in those days, in those centuries, were not understandable for the foreign companies, for the foreign traders. So in fact, they started developing banking system in India for their own purpose. Okay, so the modern banking system has been developed by the European companies, and in course of time there was a gradual, can say, a gradual development of the system in our country, and today we are finding a mature format. But I have seen at this particular juncture some of the questions in UPSC and some other examination, and that must be discussed with you. Obviously, it will be known as the background or basic facts as reflecting on the in front of you. In this connection, you must remember that the first bank to be established in India was the Bank of Hindustan. You remember the first bank to be established in India on based upon European banking system was Bank of Hindustan. It was established in 1770, 1770, by Alexander and Company, but it failed. Though it was the first bank in the country, in India, based on European banking system, but it failed. Okay, thereafter in 1806, Bank of Bengal was established. In 1840, Bank of Bombay was established. In 1843, Bank of Madras was established. You know, Bengal, that is Kolkata, Bombay, and Madras, were the headquarters of the Britishers. And these headquarters uh, were situated in all these three places. Okay, and these were the initiatives taken by the Britishers, and these were known as presidency banks. These three places, were referred to by the Britishers as presidency. Presidency means their headquarters, and these three banks were situated at their headquarters and called presidency banks. Going forward, in 1921, all these presidency banks were merged together, and these were renamed as Imperial Bank of India. Imperial Bank of India. Once again, I am repeating, all these three presidency banks were merged together and renamed as Imperial Bank of India. Okay, you might have heard this name. After independence, Imperial banks continued till 1955. In 1955, the government of India decided to nationalize Imperial Bank of India, and it happened. And once again it was renamed as State Bank of India. So it was a series, just you can recall in different way. Starting from 1806 to 1955. 1955. This was the gradual development of State Bank of India in our country. Okay. So State Bank of India is one of the, this was the first nationalized bank in our country, and thereafter not only this, and State SBI today is the largest commercial banks in the country. Okay. In this continuation, in 1881, Awadh Commercial Bank was established. The most important thing is that it was the first bank established by the Indian, and it has been the question in UPSC around 2010, I think. Question was that which was the first bank to be established by the Indian. Okay, it means that all other banks, what I mentioned earlier, were not established by the Indian people. So Awadh Commercial Bank was the first bank in the country established by the Indian. But simultaneously, you must know it also contained foreign capital. So it means that it was not fully Indian bank. So another question, which one will be known as the first fully Indian bank? The answer is Punjab National Bank. When you see the question paper, several times it has been the question mentioning the term first. There are three questions relating to the first bank in India, but answer might be different. So you'll be cautious whenever you face this kind of question. Okay. So once again I am repeating that first bank in India was Bank of Hindustan. First bank by Indian, that was Awadh Commercial Bank, and first fully Indian bank it was Punjab National Bank. Okay. As far as the other banks are concerned, historically it's not important for our examination because these were the initial initiatives and some specifications are there, that's why it has been the area of question. Otherwise history is not so important for us. Our main area is economics, not the history. As far as the Punjab National Bank is concerned, you might have heard the name. This is the third largest bank, public sector bank in our country, and it was established in 1894. And one of the well-known freedom fighter, Lala Lajpat Rai, was one of the co-founder of the Punjab National Bank. Okay, so these were the some facts, and you must remember. But but as far as the today's structure of Indian market, money market, Indian banking system is concerned, it's very expensive, it's very large, it's very complicated, and it's not possible for anyone to mug up and to remember all these facts and the development in one line and two line. Okay, so it's a very difficult task to make a to mug up all these things together and to make a comparative study. Okay, so for the examination point of view, we'll just try to understand today's structure of Indian market through an flow chart, and this will help us a lot to understand the things in detail. Okay, so this is flow chart. I hope that this will be visible to all of you. This is brief structure of Indian money market. Okay, just visible to all of you. The entire money market has been divided into two parts: organized and unorganized. Organized money market, also called formal, because the term organized and formal are considered synonym in economic study. Okay, and next one is unorganized, that is called informal sector. Unorganized means you will get in the entire study of economics both these terms, organized, unorganized, formal, informal, will be frequently used. So before going forward, we must have the complete idea and to make the things clear. Unorganized means which is not registered, which is not under purview of the government. It's very difficult to collect the data. So that sector is unorganized. As far as the organized is concerned, it is those organizations, those who are completely registered under the government, They are following and they are abide by the rules and regulations set in the country, and they are bound to follow all those rules and regulations. Their data are available and they are following the government policies. So obviously, the main area of our study is the organized or formal sector of money market instead of unorganized sector. So we'll give more focus on organized market, organized money market. And if there is any question, I hope that this will be only from here. And the entire analysis of Indian money market will give a lot of information apart from the questions also. So just try to understand. Under organized Indian money market, RBI is on the top, being the boss or regulator of the entire money market. Okay. Here, before going forward, I would like to recall you that money market is the market of short-term transactions. Okay. So whenever any kind of organization, just remember as a concept, this is important fact for all of you, not available in the books. Any kind of organization functioning, any kind of financial institutions or organization functioning inside the economy, if they are dealing any short-term transaction, they will fall under RBI's purview and RBI's jurisdiction, and they will have to follow the rules and regulations for set by RBI, irrespective of their core areas of function. In our country, different kinds of financial institutions are functioning: financial markets, financial institutions, organizations, financial services. So whenever they will deal with any short-term transactions for less than 1 year, that function will fall under RBI, irrespective of their core functions. Okay, so you'll have to remember all these things. And apart from other functions, one of the most important functions where all the financial institutions are clubbed together, that is the sale and purchase of government securities. We must know that sale and purchase of government securities is a very frequent and very familiar phenomena across the economy, and it is conducted by RBI from time to time. And almost all financial institutions functioning in our country, irrespective of domestic or foreign, participate in the sale and purchase of government securities. And whenever they will involve in all these activities, they will fall under RBI. So, having kept in mind this sort of concept, we can go forward. Under RBI, each and every function and each and every organization is just functioning. First come on the commercial banks. The name is very familiar. Commercial banks are generally those banks where we go frequently to open the account, to withdraw the money, and for and just for loan also. So these kind of activities in our day-to-day banking system, and around us a lot of commercial banks are situated. You know the name better. All these banks generally where we are visiting frequently, these are the commercial banks. The main function is to extend loan, to receive the deposits, to open the accounts. Okay, so that's, and the commercial banks in our country are divided into two parts, reflecting in the chart: public sector commercial banks and private sector commercial banks. As far as the public sector commercial banks are concerned, it means that these banks are owned by the government, means ownership of these banks are in the hands of the government. That's why these are considered as public sector bank. Means the share, you can say, and that will be clear later on, but you must know, wherever out of the total capital, if more than 51% capital is held by the government will be the owner. Okay, and there are several categories of Indian public sector commercial banks. Here the first is a State Bank of India. I have already clarified you. Second category is nationalized bank. Okay, nationalized, even several times I have used the term nationalized. So you must know the meaning. Nationalization is one of the policy of the government and it was very much in practice before 1990. Okay. Nationalization means it's a kind of control. Whenever nationalization, any kind of organization is nationalized, it means that it is going to be controlled by the government directly. That is the meaning. Okay. So as far the nationalization of banks was concerned, you remember that it's area of question also. In 1969, for the first time, this policy was adopted by Madam Gandhi, that is Indira Gandhi, in 1969, and 14 major banks of the country were nationalized and they came under the control of the government so that the objective of the nationalization was that so that all these banks could make parity with the government policies and all these banks could participate in the social and economic development of the country. That was the main objective. Okay. Once again, in 1980, 6 more banks were nationalized. So the total number is 20. But later on, one bank, New Bank of India, was merged with Punjab National Bank, and that number came down 19. And for a longer period, the total number of nationalized banks was 19. Okay. Under this 19, you will remember RBI is SBI is not included. It's information for you. SBI was since nationalized initially in 1955. I have already clarified. So among the 19 nationalized banks, what I explained just now, SBI was not included. Okay. So under these 19 nationalized banks, and they continued to function for a longer period. But more recently, when the new government came into power in 2014, they decided to merge the public sector banks together. And going forward in that continuation, last year government decided to merge some of the banks and merger process was started and till now it has been completed also. You might have heard and might have studied in the newspapers also. And as of at present, this is important for you, at present the total number of nationalized banks has come down to 11. Total number of nationalized banks has become 11 from 19 to 11. So when we club the SBI with the 11 nationalized banks, the total number of public sector banks would be 12. So that all these 12 banks today, 12 public sector banks are functioning across the country. Okay. But you may put up the question once again under public sector banks, the regional rural banks, RRBs is also the part of this one. Okay, so you just ready for the clarification. As far the regional rural sector banks are concerned, okay, there are 3 types of ownership of RRBs. And when RRBs were started in 1975, it was a question also. Regional rural banks were started in our country in 1975 across the states except 2 states of the country. These 2 states are Sikkim and Goa. There was no RRBs in Sikkim and Goa, but in all other states these are situated and their capital is divided into 3 categories. There are 3 parts of their capital. 50% capital of regional rural banks is arranged by the central government. 50%, 50. 15%, that is 15, 15% capital is shared with the state governments and rest 35% are participated by the sponsored banks. Sponsored banks means those who sponsor it. So it means that each and every regional rural bank is sponsored by any nationalized banks. Generally, in most of the cases, RRBs are sponsored by the nationalized banks, somewhere by SBI, somewhere by Punjab National Bank, somewhere by Bank of Baroda, somewhere by some other public sector banks. So in this way, these are the three categories. Once again, I am repeating: 50% central government, 15% state government, and rest 35% by the sponsored banks. Okay. Gradually, the number of when RRBs were established, their number was 196, but today it has become irrelevant because their number is going to be reduced drastically as per the policy of the government. Wherever these are not functioning properly, it is going to be merged in another banks. So the process is going on. Okay. So in this way, we got the idea regarding public sector banks. Okay. The second category of commercial bank is private sector banks. Private sector banks means, as the name is reflecting, there is a private ownership held by the private uh, entity, and it is divided into two categories. Private sector banks are divided into two categories: Indian private sector banks and foreign private sector banks. Indian private sector banks, their number is around 25, 24. So all name is not important to be mentioned here. Okay. But I will discuss in detail because some questions are involved here. Some names are reflected here. For example, under Indian private sector bank, the largest bank is ICICI. One more question and one more specification is just involved with the ICICI, that is called Universal Banking System. ICICI is the first private sector bank in the country that adopted universal banking system. Universal banking system means when a bank start dealing with other economic activities apart from their core banking activities, say for example involved into sale and purchase of shares and other securities, start dealing with the insurances also. These are not core area of banking, but whenever any bank will start do something like that, that particular phenomena is called universal banking system. So ICICI, remember it has been a question also. The ICICI bank in our country is the first bank that adopted universal banking system, and as of now almost all banks, all large banks, whether private or public sector banks, are involved in all these activities. Okay, so that's why the term universal banking system has been diluted and no one is talking about that, but it must be a question and has been the question. Thereafter, some more names are HDFC, the second largest, Axis Bank, the third largest bank in the country among the public sector banks. Some years back, there was a question in UPSC on this particular issue. Which private bank in India got the first license of private banking? Just consider the answer. Which private bank in India got the first license of private banking? The answer is UTI Bank. You might have heard the name of UTI, Unit Trust of India. Okay, UTI was created in 1964, uh, but later on it was divided into two parts. The another part was the UTI Bank, and UTI Bank was the first bank to get the first license of private banking in the country. But later on, it was renamed as Axis Bank, at the name is mentioned here. So you must know that UTI Bank and Axis Bank both are same. Axis Bank is the new name of UTI Bank. Okay. You must know from time to time it is up to RBI to extend the licenses of private banking to the new banks. Say for example, in 2013-14, generally in 13, date year is not so important to be remembered, but if I could recall, in 2013, RBI offered to the banking and financial system in the country to give some new licenses of private banking. Even today, apart from other criteria to start banking in our country for any private person, The minimum financial requirement is 500 crore. The minimum requirement of capital is 500 crore apart from other requirements. So RBI in 2013, when they decided to give some more licenses, they they set some norms and parameters that or eligibility. Around 25 financial institutions were qualified to participate and to apply for the new license. But you must know, lastly, only two banks got the license, and those were the IDFC Bank and second was Bandhan Bank. IDFC Bank and Bandhan Bank. So these are the two new private sector banks in our country. Thereafter, there is no license. So Bandhan Bank and IDFC banks are the latest newly constituted private sector banks, private sector commercial banks. So in this way, there are so many other banks also. Uh, you may not, you may know better because all names are not mentioned to be, not necessary to be mentioned here. As far as the foreign banks are concerned, no more than 40, around 45 foreign sector public banks, private sector banks are functioning in our country. All foreign banks are private banks, undoubtedly. Name all names are not necessary to be remembered. Generally, the foreign banks are situated in the big cities, in the metros, where they get big business deal. Okay, some examples have been mentioned here. ICBC. ICBC means Industrial and Commercial Bank of China. Some years back, I got this name in the newspapers when ICBC opened its branch in Mumbai, and it is the largest bank of China. Similarly, Standard and Chartered. Some years back, there was a question in UPSC: which bank in India, which foreign bank in India is having the largest maximum number of branches? You must know, Standard and Chartered is the answer. This question was asked in 2010 and the answer was Standard and Chartered. It is a UK based bank, but you will be surprised to know even today this is the answer. If even today this question is going to be repeated, which foreign bank is having maximum branches in India? The answer is Standard and Chartered. Another name has been given, RBS, Royal Bank of Scotland. There might be so many examples like Citibank, it's an American bank. So in this way, there are so many banks, foreign banks are functioning, and it's good for our economy. It's good for our economy because they have been allowed after 92-93 in our country when economic reforms were started. Before that, it was not possible. It is another issue we'll discuss in detail in some other videos. Okay, so it was all about the commercial banks in our country. Now, the second segment of or nice sector is or nice sector of money market is NBFCs. Always reflecting newspapers. You might have acquainted with them. NBFCs means non-banking financial companies. The obvious question here: why NBFCs? Non-banking. In what way these are different from the banks? That is the obvious question. And question has been asked also. You must know, non-banking financial companies are registered under Company Act, but these are regulated by RBI. First thing you'll remember. Second thing is that as far the differences are concerned with the banks, non-banking companies cannot open savings account. They can't issue check or draft. Okay, it means NBFCs are not the part of payment and settlement system of Reserve Bank of India. Uh, if I put a question to you, name some NBFCs. There are so many NBFCs: Muthoot Finance, Manappuram Gold Loan, Sahara India, Tata Finance, Reliance Finance, Bajaj Finance, wherever the term finance is there. As far as Indian NBFCs are concerned, they will have to take license from RBI to function as a NBFC. Okay, and generally, broadly, there are two type of NBFC in our country: deposits and non-deposits. Deposits means NBFC are allowed to receive deposits from the public. If it is non-deposit, they cannot accept deposit from the public. I mean to say that NBFCs are involved in the respective areas for what they have got license from RBI. Say for example, suppose Mannapuram Gold Loan. Mannapuram Gold Loan got license for extend loan on behalf of gold. So that will involve only on that particular activity. If they want to start something new, they will have to take permission from RBI. So that's why these are the differences of NBFC. But right now, in our economy, NBFCs are playing vital role. Okay. The next category is of DFIs, that is developmental financial institutions. DFIs means these are the financial institutions created by the government broadly to provide long-term loan facility in their respective areas. In their respective areas. Say for example, the best example is SIDBI, SIDBI. You might have heard the name SIDBI, the Small Industrial Development Bank of India. You must know SIDBI is. SIDBI was created in 1990, and the main function is to extend long-term loan for the small industries to the MSMEs. Okay, so their functions are specific. They can extend loan only their particular area. So that is called DFIs. So there are so many DFIs. I can just mention another example. Exim Bank, suppose Export Import Bank. This bank was created in 1982. Before that, it was one of the segment of IDBI. You know, IDBI now a private bank. Earlier, it was a public sector bank, but some years back, government sold it to uh, LIC, Life Insurance Corporation, and thereafter it became a private sector bank. So Exim Bank was one of the part of IDBI, but now it is independent. So Exim Bank, the main function to extend loan only to the exporter and importer, not to other people. So this kind of activities, these kind of institutions are generally referred to as developmental financial institutions, in short DFIs. So it is another category. But all these institutions are also one of the biggest participants in the sale and purchase of government securities, okay, apart from their core area of function. Another category is of investment institutions, and two examples are given here: LIC and GIC, Life Insurance Corporation and General Insurance Corporation. Well known name in the country. LIC is dealing with life insurance. GIC is dealing with non-life insurance. Non-life means house, cars, all these things. Did you ever think that all these companies are very valuable, earning too much, always in profit, and where they are using their capital? So you must know that apart from their core area of function, LIC, GIC like organizations are one of the largest investors in economy. They extend loan to the big houses, big corporate houses, extend loan to the government also in the need wherever it is required. So apart from their core area, these are also considered as investment institutions. Okay, so you will just consider all these in a different way. Next segment is of refinancing institutions. A lot of questions I have seen here in the past years. So we'll just try to understand all of you. Some questions are conceptual questions, not you can say available in the books, but if you are clear about that, it will be easy for you to decide the answer. Some basic facts you must remember regarding refinancing institutions. The first thing is that refinancing, well, first come on the meaning. Refinancing has two meanings. The first meaning is that They are financed by the government and they finance too in their respective areas. Second meaning is that they extend loan to the respective areas, recover the loan, and use the capital to refinance some other areas, some other people. Okay. So there are two meaning of refinancing. Second thing is that refinancing institutions in our country are apex in their area. They are on the top in their area. Okay. Third important thing, that was a question also. There is no direct public dealing in the refinancing institutions. As some names are given here, NABARD. You might have heard the name, well-known name in the country. National Bank for Agricultural and Rural Development, NABARD. It was established in 1982 and it is the apex body in our country for agricultural and rural development. Must remember, NABARD is not a bank. It has been the question. NABARD is not a bank, though the term bank has been mentioned. National Bank for, but it's not a bank. It is a refinancing institutions. It's a very important and very interesting question whenever you get in the examination. NABARD is not a bank. It is a refinancing institutions. Okay. NHB, National Housing Bank. It was created in 1988. You just remember, National Housing Bank. It is the apex body in the country for extending loan and for the promotion of housing sector in our country. Housing sector in our country, and this has been also the regulator of all the housing financing companies in our country. But last year in budget, government announced that the regulation of housing financing countries in our country will be taken from NHB and this will be handed over to RBI. So it means that housing financing companies now are falling under jurisdiction of RBI, not directly under NHB. One more interesting information that for a longer period, NHB was one of the 100% subsidiary of RBI. It means that NHB was created by RBI by investing the entire money. But some years back, government, because it was not looking fair, the same organization is controlling everything and running the businesses also. So therefore, government decided to take over NHB. So now NHB has taken over from RBI. The money has been paid by Government of India to RBI. So these are the information relating to NHB. Okay, but still it is dealing with the housing development. The government has targeted to make house for to provide house to each and everyone by 2022. So NHB is playing vital role. PMAY, Prime Minister Awas Yojana is going on, and NHB is financing. So it is refinancing, government finance NHB and NHB finance other finance companies, housing finance companies, and they finance to the common people. Okay. So that's the process. You cannot access NABARD, NHB directly. The third most important example is it has been the question in UPSC in 2015 and it is Mudra Bank. Mudra means Micro Units Development and Refinancing Agency. Micro Units Development and Refinancing Agency. So Mudra, you must know, it's a refinancing institution that the name is reflecting, and it is also the regulator of the microfinance company in our country. Apart from that, nowadays you might have heard the Mudra loan. Today Mudra loan is being distributed through Mudra, not directly through the Mudra, through the other banks. And three types of loans are available for the self-employment and to expand the businesses: Shishu, Tarun and Kishore. Shishu, there are three categories. Shishu loan is for I think 50,000, Tarun for 50,000 to 5 lakh, and Kishore for 5 lakh to 10 lakh. So that's the criteria, and as I have heard several times, if directly from the Prime Minister and some other sources also. More than 4 crore people have 6 crores, around 6 crore people have got benefited through the Mudra loans. And interestingly, the 80% borrowers are the women. So it is also one of the important segments of women empowerment. Okay. In fact, on the basis of this fact of the 6 per people got benefited through the Mudra loan, government is saying that they would have started their businesses and they would have been employed. Okay. So these were the all about the refinancing institutions. Another segment is of cooperative banks. Cooperative banks, available everywhere, generally run by the state government, and somewhere some central governments also involved here. The main function and the main area of function of the cooperative banks to extend loan to the farmers, and cooperative banks generally extend short and medium term loans to the farmers. This information is important for examination point of view. In case of agriculture sector, you must remember the meaning of short term is somewhat changed. Here it becomes 15 months. Okay. And medium term means 15 months to 5 years. So it means that cooperative banks extend loan to the farmer for maximum up to 5 years. Okay. And these are situated in the small towns and village areas. Similarly, land development banks, they are also having their presence in all the states, almost all the states, and they extend loan to the farmers for long term period. Here the long term means more than 5 years. Okay. In South Indian states, land development banks are also known as land mortgaged banks. They mortgage the land of the farmers, okay, and extend loan to the farmers. Once the loan is completed, the paper of the land by this bank is returned to the farmers, and farmers are allowed to function even during the loan period. So these are the brief description of the Indian money market, but this will be completed when we discuss another segment of Indian money market, that is called sub-market. Sub-market is one of the segments of, you can say, money market, Indian money market. Sometimes I just make this attach this market with the money market, but here it's better to uh, discuss in detail separately. Sub market is the part of, as I mentioned here, of the money market, and it's a kind of facility, it's a kind of instrument to facilitate the transaction. And the Indian sub money market has been divided into two parts: call money market. uh, Generally, common people are not acquainted with the call money market, but for the examination point of view it is important, and you must remember call money market is the market of very short term period. And under call money market, loans are transacted only for 1 to 14 days. 1 to 14 days. No collateral is required, nothing is placed to the lender and borrower. But generally, large financial institutions are the participants, because it's not possible for any small organization, institution like RRBs and all these small banks to participate, because their capital is not so large. So generally, even government organizations like NABARD, NHB, LIC, GIC are the participants. But the condition is that they could participate only as a lender, not as a borrower. Okay. So here under call money market, loans are transacted only for 1 to 14 days. Okay. So that must be remembered. Next one is bill market. Bill market is a market of instrument market. Bills are certain money market instruments, means it's a kind of paper on behalf of which loans are transacted. Okay. And on the basis of the nature, the bills are divided into two categories: commercial bills and treasury bills. Okay. As far as the commercial bills are concerned, these are issued by the non-government institutions. Non-government mean not directly by the government. Suppose even State Bank of India, it's a government-owned company as a bank, it can issue. So any uh, apart from the government itself, even government running institutions and private institutions can issue commercial bills to arrange loan for a short term period. So it depends, obviously, it will depend on the credibility of that particular institutions. In the entire chapter, this entire sub market, the call money market and the treasury bills are very important for the examination point of view. As far as the treasury bills are concerned, when you go through the newspaper, this term on the economic page, the page of economic news, TBs here, that TBs mean treasury bills. So you must remember some facts here. Treasury bills are issued by RBI on behalf of government. Once again, I am repeating. Treasury bills are issued by RBI on behalf of the government. So the government is the ownership of the treasury bills, but these are transacted, that is sold and purchased through RBI. And these bills are available for three periods: 91 days, 182 days, and 364 days, means less than 1 year. Say for example, suppose government needs loan for 3 months. In such a case, 91 days treasury bills will be issued. Okay. Similarly, 182 days, 6 months, and 364 less than 1 year. But in practice, 91 days and 182 days treasury bills are frequently sold and purchased by RBI. When you visit on RBI sites, these instruments, treasury bills, and their sale and purchase are available. And all the organizations what we discussed in this chart, like under money market, all these institutions and organizations, means financial institutions and organizations, are the participants of the bill market, especially the treasury bill market, because these are issued on behalf of government by RBI. So suppose if any bank is purchasing treasury bills from RBI, it means this money is going to the government, and there is a certain rate of interest, generally around the repo rate decided by RBI. It is reflecting in the sites of RBI, not reflecting the newspaper, because it is an internal mechanism. So these are the treasury bills and frequently used in the money market. Okay, so it was the description of the development of banking system in India and the structure of Indian money market. So when you go through the newspaper, I hope that you will get benefited and you will be in position to uh, understand the newspaper. If any news is based upon all these activities, this video and my lecture will help you to understand it properly. Okay. So to understand it properly, you will have to hear the lecture and see the video, watch the video, not once, twice, thrice. Okay. As many times you will hear it, you will get something new, and this will be a revision for you also, and this will give you a lot. Okay. But it doesn't mean that the financial system or the money market is going to be completed. No, there is another area, and I think it's a rather further important area that we need to discuss in detail. That is, then the heading would be the contemporary issues. Contemporary issues means whatever we have discussed till now, in what way it is happening in our day-to-day life, in the day-to-day economy, that needs to be clarified. And today, whenever you are going to when you are going to go through any book, going through the daily newspaper, you are getting a lot of new terms, lot of new information, lot of new news based on the financial system, especially on the money market. But I know the reality based on my past experiences of 18 years. Majority of the most of the news based on the financial system are not clear to the majority of people. I know the problem. So through my video, I'll just try to resolve this kind of problem. So in the next video, we'll discuss in detail the contemporary issues. Contemporary issues means whatever the events taking place in the global economy, in the national economy. So I'll just try to cover up them one by one, making a list, and I hope that you'll get benefited, and this will help you a lot to crack your examination. Okay, so thanks to all of you. In the next video, wait for that, and we'll discuss the contemporary issues, and that will help you a lot. Okay, thanks to all of you. Have a nice day to all of you.